It raises the question of, oh, do you want to approach something that has its own sort of built-in cult status? Um, I mean, largely the reason that they made a sequel is because the first one was so successful. Which is honestly, I mean, I felt like at the end of the first one, when you watched it, and this before, like we'd seen it before we got approached to it, that it was just kind of an insular, awesome little thrill ride. And then we found out that they wanted to do a sequel. And so obviously, I mean, and they kind of came to it with a couple of ideas of how that might even be. Because like you said, like when you get to the end, like it seems pretty well wrapped up. And so they had some other ideas to how to expand on the mythology, to give us to work with, and we kind of went from there. But I mean, going into it, I think that ultimately we were excited to jump into any project, and especially one that had such a rad beginning to it. And so, like, and we'd been sort of, there were a couple of other things that might have been, something to pursue, but for us, it would have been like, really kind of not too enthusiastic about it. Projects that were like less than, I don't know, artistically satisfying, or you know what I'm saying. So, anyway, so when this came along, I mean, we were one excited that it was something that was, we were originally into to begin with, and two, very excited to be actually, getting hired to work on something because I mean, and also starting from like, really small indie film stuff that we had done before, it was definitely a step up. I think, well, I mean, ultimately, we sat down to make a supernatural mystery movie. Is it? I mean, and that's sort of it. When the audience is sitting down, there's definitely a supernatural element to it. Now, that being said, some of the most interesting genre films to me are the ones that are letting the audience read more into it. If it's telling you straight up what is happening all the time, and those movies are fine, but at the same time, the rewatchability of them, kind of becomes less than when you have something like Total Recall. Even Total Recall has, this amazing question at the end of it. What was it? Are we all just in this implanted memory, or did this really happen? So anyway, short story long, I totally encourage any sort of broader reading that, could it be in the mind or not. I mean, I feel like it's probably supernatural. Like if I had to come down on it, I would say yes, it's supernatural. But at the same time, like we definitely play that question as to whether or not this is in her head and how much of it's in her head. The Pact 2 is essentially an expansion into the mythology that was set up in the Pact in the first film. So, I mean, and part of that is to make it interesting for the creative side of things, as well as for us in terms of people coming to it. It's another story told in the same world versus like the exact same story, just carbon copied so that you can experience it all over again. Which for us would basically be the reason to just go rewatch the first one. You know what I mean? So like, if you do, for us, basically it was like, what is going to make this, satisfying and what do I want to say? Satisfying basically for an audience that's hungry for stuff that happened in the first one. You know what I mean? They have an appetite for the elements that were set up in the first one and to delve deeper into, whatever this world was. So for us, I think it definitely was, almost exclusively just an expansion on that mythology. But at the same time, it hits like all these points that were pretty much set up by the first one. Like a lot of the pacing was a lot of the stuff that was set. We were taking a lot of our cues or sort of playing the song, if you will, that was set up, from the first film. Let's see. The best way I can describe working with Caity was, it was, I mean, it's really we met with her a couple of times before, and when we first started the project, we weren't sure how involved she was going to be able to be because of her schedule, shooting with Arrow, and then other stuff, and she's working on other features as well. And so we were told that it would be pretty limited. And then we found out as we went along in the process that we were actually going to be able to have her more involved. And so then we expanded on her character. Which was great, but that also included meeting with her and talking with her. And I mean, the beauty of it is that she's already done so much work with the Annie Barlow character that she sort of already, can live it and breathe it, as soon as she steps on set, which was invaluable. And then it was also really fun to watch her like step on set in the wardrobe for Annie Barlow. And so that was neat, like seeing the character come back. But that being said, she's incredibly down to earth, and she's also super funny, which I wasn't ready for because Annie Barlow's so serious. And then, like in a meeting with Caity, she has a really great sense of timing and comedy, which was very refreshing. And we even wrote in some stuff just kind of playing up to that. Yeah, I mean, it was. I didn't necessarily get a sense that, any sort of distance from her coming on set for this or anything like that. I think she was, as soon as she came on, it was just sort of like, she just kind of stepped right back into the role. That's a good question. It's weird because I can't it's always strange whenever I presume to think about the audience, but at the same time, I mean, I guess I can put it this way, like when we make films that we would want to watch. So in that sense, I would want to take away where it was something that sort of, basically took a turn in that same world that the first Pact was set up in, but that basically, took an examination, I guess, of the types of relationships that can end up sort of how do you want to say, informing or almost like toxic relationships, because that was that was basically the first film. We always felt that it was sort of this examination of the way that the repercussions that family and cumulative narrative have. And then with the first one, it was just obviously like pretty horrendous. So like that was our main kernel that we wanted to wrap this one around on. But in doing so, it was just sort of, it's kind of like at all things that we're involved in, it's sort of an existential examination. So with the character of June Abbott, it was, just sort of this self-examination of finding out who she really was, and in doing so, sort of comes face to face with like the horrific sort of, the horrific qualities that are inherent in that. So like, I think, that was kind of, I think and the weird sort of cathartic nature of that, I think was sort of what we wanted, the main takeaway to be. No, it's actually a pretty big camera. I think when it's fully loaded, it's right around like 40 pounds ish. It could be anywhere between 30 to 50. So it's a bigger camera. And your main options, and they're always expanding. But on a lot of feature projects, your main options are generally, the Red camera or the Alexa. And it's so we were shooting it in 2K resolution, which anymore now, even now, like a year later, like 4K's pretty much become the standard thing that's readily available. Even the GoPro Hero's like 4K now, which blows my mind. But anyway, but yeah, so we were using the Alexa, which is the Airflex high definition video camera. And then we used, I think we even shot it on Cooke S4 lenses, which are primes. And that was pretty much the camera package. And then our DP was Carmen Cabana, who was, I believe she's Colombian and Venezuelan. And she was terrific. And essentially that was I think that was basically, she wanted to use the red, I remember originally, but then with those lenses, we ended up switching over to the Alexa. And for my money, it looks like $1,000,000, so I love it. I love that camera. For us, with this one, we wanted it to be a lot more controlled, especially versus what we had done with Entrance, and Entrance was exclusively all handheld. And so this one, it's always the camera, except for one shot that I can think of, is almost all on some sort of contraption. So primarily we shot on sticks, and then we shot on using sliders and dolly track. Movement. And then there were we had a porta jib, which is especially shooting around that house. We needed like a jib that was able to be taken into small quarters but still usable, you know. So we used a lot of the porta jib, and then we had a steady cam for some of the other stuff. So that was pretty, like a lot of it was sort of from the outset, we knew we wanted it to be a little more controlled. In terms of stuff coming up, we've got another horror feature that's coming up. Hopefully, we'll be shooting it early next year with the same production company, hopefully. So that's kind of like on our radar right now, and we're working on the script and hopefully, yeah, before too long, we'll be jumping into production for that one, and we're really excited about that one. But I can't say too much more about it right now. But yeah, that's about it.